You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Hey everybody, welcome back into the Hazard Ground Podcast. We always appreciate you joining us each and every week. Before we get to this week's episode, I want to continue with the great news that we've had as our connection with Amazon is growing. That's right, if you're an Amazon shopper, here's all you got to do. Go to our website, hazardground.com, and click on the Amazon banner. You do your regular Amazon shopping, and guess what else? You get to help out some great veterans organizations, because every time you go to hazardground.com and click on the Amazon banner and do your shopping that way, we are going to donate a portion of the proceeds to one of the veterans charities that's been featured here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. So it doesn't take anything for you to do other than your normal Amazon shopping to get done what you need to get done and be a part of something bigger and help out some great veterans charities. Again, hazardground.com, click on the Amazon banner. One more thing before we get started. Also wanted to give a quick thank you and shout out to all of those who have left ratings and reviews on iTunes. They help so much with getting the word out about the podcast and moving Hazard Ground up in the rankings amongst other podcasts, and ultimately getting these great stories out to the masses. We read every one of your reviews and we appreciate them so very, very much. So keep them coming. It's great to see the podcast continues to grow and is getting out there and helping inspire others. We've had several people come tell us they've recommended it to coworkers, classmates, friends, and even mental health professionals as a means to help with the treatment of PTSD. So we can't thank everyone enough who continues to support this show. So a quick shout out and thanks to a few individuals, and we'll give you their handles here. VTD98, Charlie Brown 12345, Team Tennyson, J Good 22, 804 Hokey, R3322, Ride Tom Go, and They Call Me Memphis Range. Thank you for all of your reviews. Keep them coming, spread the word, and make sure you tell a friend. This week, very special guests. I am very excited to talk to them both. You'll know them if you go to Fight Oar Die, that's O-A-R, fightoordie.org, because, well, there's a team of 4 veterans who are going to row across the Atlantic Ocean. And joining us today on the Hazard Ground Podcast is the leader of that team. His name is Alex Evans. He's a former staff sergeant and a former paratrooper and a British Army recce asset. And joining him is Dr. Jacob Hyde, who is going to be monitoring their trip from the start to finish. He is also a former Marine Corps Navy corpsman who deployed to Iraq and eventually became a psychologist, and now he's monitoring them as they go across the Atlantic Ocean. This is an incredible story, one we're very excited to tell, and we want to welcome both Alex Evans and Dr. Jacob Hyde to the Hazard Ground Podcast. Gentlemen, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us. Thank you very much.
All right, let's start with you, Alex. Before we get to how you came up with Fight or Die and everything else, let's go back to the beginning of your military career. How'd you get in? Why'd you sign up? And give us the circumstances.
Well, so I was going to college. I was actually spending more time out of college than in college. So it was time for a change, time to do something positive. And honestly needed some more discipline in my life. So we signed up, and I signed up, and decided, hey, I watched all the videos they had at MIPS, and none of them really looked appealing except for infantry. So I signed up for infantry, and then went to infantry school, then airborne school, then javelin school, and a couple schools. Ended up in the 82nd. Just kind of didn't want to do anything boring. So infantry is what it was.
Did your parents have any issues with you quitting college?
To be honest with you, they did not. They did have issues with me joining the infantry, though.
Oh, okay.
They knew they knew they knew what was going on. I wasn't exactly getting the best marks. I was spending too much time being a 19, 20-year-old kid rather than sticking my nose in the books. So made a decision to do something positive.
Was it pre 9/11 or post 9/11?
That was post 9/11. I went to college in. Excuse me, it's pre 9/11. I went to college in 2000. Well, I guess it's both. It was right at 9/11, actually. Right afterwards, I decided to join the Army in 2004. I had gone to college pre 9/11 and then post 9/11 joined. So sort of the confusion there.
No, well, the only reason I ask is just because, obviously when you said your parents said you wanted to do the infantry, I was wondering if it's because the likelihood of you going to war.
Well, both of my parents are Vietnam era, baby boomers, and my mother, had a very good friend. It was her. It was actually her fiance back in the day that didn't make it back. He was an Air Force PJ. Ended up, not coming back. MIA, KIA. POW. It's it's possible. So she had a real issue with anything associated with warfare.
And for those listening not familiar, an Air Force PJ, as in Papa, not DJ, is a pararescueman jumper, one of the more dangerous jobs in all of the Air Force. All right, so you sign up after 9/11, and you do all the schools and everything else. You felt pretty comfortable that you were deploying fairly quickly?
Well, once you go through, your basic and your infantry school, which, really you learn everything when you get to your unit, but you're kind of molded into a war fighter. So, you've got all this training that you think you have already as a private, but you want to go use it. Right. So, we were, the privates and the younger soldiers coming into this unit. I mean, we were more or less anxious, to head over.
Let's switch gears here and talk to Jacob. Before you became Dr. Jacob Hyde, psychologist, you were a Marine and a veteran of the Iraq War. How did you sign up and when was it?
So, school really wasn't going well for me either when I was about 19 years old. And, the only thing I had really ever done well in my life besides be a punk was swim. And so I thought, maybe I should start watching the news a little bit more and maybe I'll get more involved in the world and maybe I'll figure out something to do. So I started watching the news, and it just happened to be 2004 when this really heated election where George W. Bush was running. I grew up in North Carolina, and so I grew up fairly conservative, sheltered young man and thought that George Bush just sounded amazing. And all the things he was saying were so inspiring. And I thought, he's saying we should go get the terrorists, and he's saying we should go and essentially bring our brand of democracy to the world. And as a 19-year-old kid from the South, that sounded really great. So the only thing I had really ever done well was swim. And so I thought, well, if I'm going to be in the military, what do I do? And I thought, well, where can you go swim? And so I thought, the Coast Guard. So the first place I went when I went to a recruiting station was straight into the Coast Guard office. And this was right around November when the election occurred. And the lady in the Coast Guard office said to me, sorry, we're not taking anybody else this year. We've got a quota and we've already met it. And I looked at her just stupefied, thinking, you're full? I thought the military took anybody, but it just so happened it didn't. So I thought, well, I guess I can't swim anywhere. And I didn't know that much about the military. And again, was a very sheltered kid who'd only ever really swam and not really thought about the military. So I didn't know there were other options for swimming other than the Coast Guard. But next door was the Navy office and the Marine Corps office. And for some reason, no one was in the Marine office. And so I just went in the Navy office and I thought, well, water's cool. I like water. Let me go in here. So I went in there, talked to these guys, and they told me about a job called being a hospital corpsman or Fleet Marine Force medic. And they told me I could work with the Marines. Maybe I'd get the chance to swim one day, but probably not. But I could work with the Marine Corps. I could go to cool places. I could sort of do fun things like help people, being a medic, and see the world with the Marine Corps. And I thought, well, that sounds like the best of a lot of different worlds. Sign me up. So a few days later, I'm at the MEPS processing station doing the thing, and lo and behold, I end up in the Navy. So very similar to Alex, I think I was just lost at that point in my life. And I just joined the Navy thinking, well, I'll do this. This is cool. Turns out I had two grandfathers who were Army medics. And so being a medic was great. And I actually took to the job of being a medic really well. So I went through the school to be a medic and then got put in a Marine Corps unit for a while I was waiting to go to Fleet Marine Force school to learn to be a Marine medic. And really liked the unit I was in. It was 2nd Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion. And while I was in school to learn to be a Marine medic or FMF school, I requested to go back to that unit. And I knew that unit had just gotten off deployment and I knew they were about to go back. And I requested anyway, number one, because I loved all the guys in that unit that I'd gotten to be around. And number two, I had nothing else to do. So I thought if they're going to deploy, I can't wait. I'd love to go instead of just sitting around. And so that was sort of my story, and ended up in the Middle East. Turns out I was in Iraq at the same time as a lot of guys on this team.
Oh, wow.
And didn't know them. And so 3 of the 4 guys on this team and I were all in Iraq at the same time doing similar jobs and had had no idea that we would ever eventually meet. And so I think that was kind of serendipitous. But that's sort of how I got to where I am. And, I didn't really truly finish college until I got out of the military. And then I went to graduate school. So I got off active duty in 2007, and I stayed in the reserves until 2012. So I stayed in the reserves while I got an undergraduate degree. Then I went and got a doctorate degree, all while in the reserves, and then decided that I needed to keep working in this field. And that's how I got to where I am now.
Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. Your parents had no issues with you joining?
At that time, I really didn't care what my parents said. And so I think that was part of the problem. And so I think I let them know that I was joining, and I kind of left it at that.
And oh, by the way, obviously people who are fans of this podcast, anybody who's been in the service long enough, any of the branches, probably deployed at the same time as a whole bunch of other people that they didn't know they're deployed with at the same time. Just kind of happens that way. Alex, back to you as far as your career, because you're no longer in the military right now. So when does it end? I know this is kind of abbreviated, but how many deployments did you do? When does it end? Why does it end?
So I did 2 deployments I was in, well, unless you want to count Hurricane Katrina. So that was 2005, went down to Hurricane Katrina relief. And then went to Samarra, Iraq in 2006 to 2007. And during that time frame is when my first sergeant came down and said, "Hey, pack some stuff. You're going down to Basra to do this mission for the British." And so I did, I did from August until November in Samarra, November to April in Basra, then back from April to October of that year back in Samarra. So that was a 15-month deployment for me with the 82nd, 2nd Battalion, 505th Parachute Infantry.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that unit. Let me ask you real quick though, before you go too far, when you told you were going to go work with the British unit, were you like, what the F? Like, how does this work out? I thought I was in the United States Army.
Right. Well, one of the questions he asked me was, okay, can you fly a Raven? Are you Raven qualified? And a Raven is a...
I thought he was going to ask you, do you speak British?
Fluently.
Yeah.
No, it took a while. But I flew a Raven. I was qualified to operate it's a 4.7 pound balsa wood aircraft that you can fly out to about 10 kilometers, ceiling at about 1,800 feet. So you can you can be pretty much anywhere in a city and provide ground truth. And at the time, 2006 and 2007, this was the thing,
right?
State of the art kind of stuff. And so you can provide ground truth. You can develop target packages. You can a number of things just with this one bird without being seen. So it was a cool tool to have. And they had something called a Phoenix, but it took so many people to operate, and it wasn't of the highest quality. So we were tasked off to Multinational Coalition Forces Iraq, which is a
good old MNCI.
Yep. And so we were working with different nationalities, the British, but the British, as you know, have the Fijians, South Africans, and you have Nepalese, the Gurkha, and so you get to meet people from all walks of life and work with these guys. And I'll tell you, it was a blast meeting all these guys. Really good time with them while I was there. But so that's why I got tasked off to do that, myself and 5 of the guys from 2nd Battalion, 505th. When you say battalion, I don't want to say battalion like battalion. So get some Ranger back guys out there. Make sure that gets clarified. That's what I'm looking for. But anyway, so that's the reasoning for my British time was simply just that asset that we had to be able to use for them.
A little inside humor here. Do you have to wear that MNCI patch? Because I remember walking around Iraq and we saw everybody who wore those things like, those poor bastards, man. They must be miserable up there because all they did was sit around and do nothing.
No, we didn't. The first thing that was told, we got off a C-25 Sherpa flying boxcar. I think it's right, C-21 or C-25. Got off in Basra, meet our first British RAF guys that were kind of taking us in and getting us down to Shadal Arab, Basra North. And they just told us not to look American because there weren't really Americans out there that were going to be anywhere other than APOD West, the big base. So, I mean, we wear British pants and T-shirts or just khakis and T-shirts and kind of relaxed grooming standards type thing, but we didn't really wear uniforms at all.
So that's awesome. That was one of the things I enjoyed about the Special Forces lifestyle when I deployed with those guys. All that stuff but it was very work focused, so it was like you didn't mind doing all the extra work because you got to do a little bit of creature comforts, and it didn't have to worry about all the regular kind of, for lack of a better term, garrison activities that went on. But you got to live a little bit of a different lifestyle. I enjoyed that.
Right. Yeah. It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad. As far as the lifestyle went, but their indirect fire, incoming into that base was pretty astronomical. It was roughly a quarter mile, perimeter, and about my time there were about 400 rounds landing inside the camp.
Wow.
HE rounds. So 107s, 57s, 60s, 82s, which is kind of weird. We got hit pretty well with Indirect.
So after you finish your British time, what happens next, and at what point in your career are you in?
Well, so I go back to my unit, back in Samara, finish that out with 2505. And at that time, Samara and Bakuba, just pretty much central Iraq and the surrounding areas of Baghdad, were particularly hot. So it was an interesting thing to come back to, and then to be extended after a year to 15 months during the surge. I mean, it was an interesting experience. I mean, just being anywhere like that for 15 months straight. So, I mean, we finished that one out, then made it back to Bragg. I did re-enlist for JPAC when I was over there, and it's Joint Personnel Accounting Command. And basically what they do is they go to Southeast Asia for the most part, and the 11 Bravos that are attached basically are personal security guys for forensic pathologists. So you basically find POW MIAs and bring them back and repatriate them with their families.
Wow.
And so when I re-enlisted, I had a report date of October, and we got extended through October, and then you're out processing and all that. So I missed my report date. I ended up going to Hawaii, but when I got there, I had a problem with my orders. No, wait a minute. This says HHC 235 infantry. Yeah, it's your orders. I went needs of the Army because I missed my report date. Yeah, so I was back in the infantry. So I was back in the infantry, 2nd Battalion, 35th Infantry, after re-enlisting for JPAC. And I was back in Samara that year. I was back in Samara at the same FOB, Bob Brassfield Mora. I was in the same FOB that year. So I got I got there in March of 08, and I was deploying back to Brassfield Mora, I believe October of 08. So
Wow.
That's how quick that happened. Yeah.
That's unreal.
Yeah.
That must have been like a gut punch, man.
Oh, it was. It was. And my first sergeant was given the briefing on, where the chow hall is located, where the, laundry facilities are located and all that on these pads. It was an old blown up granary. So in the winter, in the rainy season, you have all this old grain, and it, just smells to high heaven.
Yeah.
But so he's briefing the company on where these things are located, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, man, I know this place pretty well. So
how does
back to the same FOB.
How does it end for you? When do you get out?
So when I decided to get out, basically the Army as a whole, and I guess the military, I can't speak for the Navy and the Marine Corps, any of those, but it was kind of starting to change a little bit. And, as an infantry guy, I always had really high standards of my soldiers, and I'm not saying they don't anymore, but it was just a little bit different climate, I guess you could say, with the way training was conducted, the types of training you would do. I can remember being at Fort Bragg and doing live fire exercises at range 63, like it was nothing. And, it seemed like there was a lot of red tape, and it seemed like, my toolkit was being taken away to where I couldn't protect my soldiers just because of a changing, evolving army. Right. And
Sure.
I'm not saying it's anybody's fault or anything like that. It just wasn't working for me anymore. I guess I wasn't old school, but I guess I was old school enough to, be set in my ways, as to how, you take soldiers down range, or how I would, or how I'd been taught to. And it had changed quite a bit to where, I didn't know if I was ready to make that adaptation and head to RC East with these guys, or something like that. And I just didn't. I don't know. I felt like just felt like it was my time. Love the Army, still love the Army. I'm not trying to say anything bad about the Army at all. It just changed and evolved in a way that I wasn't.
I want to ask both of you a question. We'll start with you, Jacob. But when you look back on your military service and your deployments and everything, well, particularly your deployments, what stands out to you the most? And you as a medic, Jacob, must have seen a whole bunch of different things, but what kind of stays with you?
That's a great question. A few things stay with me. I think the first thing that stays with me was my first real exposure to really extreme heat. And I know that it sounds weird, but I had never in my life been to a place so hot as Iraq was. I stepped off that plane in Al Asad, and it was like in the 130s. And I thought, holy shit, where am I? And how am I going to survive this? And I wasn't scared of the bullets or the bombs. I was scared of the heat. It was so hot. That's one of the big things that still sticks with me to this day. And, honestly, that exposure to the heat and the way that it made me feel actually drove me to my job today. So my job is to understand and try to better figure out how humans perform in isolated, confined, and extreme environments. And it certainly was an extreme environment to be in 130-degree heat. And so that's one of the biggest things that stuck with me and actually led me into this career, was getting really hot my first day in Iraq and just hating it. The other thing I think that really sticks with me from being in the Middle East was my third day on my first deployment. And it was, sitting around knowing that we were about to go and do a really serious job. And then all of a sudden, 3 little girls who had been shot all over their bodies got rolled in front of me, and it just became real. And life for me changed that day. I forgot about how hot it was. I forgot about how shitty the situation was. I forgot about all the things except for these girls right in front of me. And that's where I think my life really changed, was that day. And that, I think, that's what really has stuck with me throughout the years from my time in the military. No one mission, no one deployment, no one person in the military, but really that third day when those girls got put in front of me, that's what kind of defines my military experience, I think.
Let me just stay with this for a second. Did that make it, was it just kind of the casualty of war, so to speak, that made that so ingrained in you? Or was it, because it was small children? Or just give me a little more.
I was 19 years old and not that intelligent of a kid, and certainly had never really been exposed to terrible tragedy in my life. And to that point, all I knew again was that George Bush had to be right. And then I was there to defend freedom and bring democracy to the world. I didn't know I was going to be there to patch up little girls who had been shot for no good reason. And so I think that's why it sticks with me, is I knew what I was going to do as a medic, and I had done it before. But now I have 3 innocent casualties who were not war fighters. That was my first casualties to deal with in Iraq. That sucked. And that's, I think, just what really continues to stick with me, is that that's when I understood that the world was a whole different place than I had grown up knowing, and that the world was never going to be the same for me.
Not to get all existential, but, it's funny how experience and the idea of experience, you can't ever prepare for it. And Alex, you can speak to this for all the training that you did, right? For as much as you go through all the training, inevitably in combat, we always see something that we never prepared for. It just happens that way. And the idea of gaining experience, we all think, oh yeah, well, we'll figure this out as we go along. And then something happens and you go, well, there was no playbook for this. There was no manual for this. So it's a pretty lucid point, Jacob, that you bring up, to say the least. But Alex, let's go to you on what stays with you from your time.
Well, quite a bit. Just like you said, dude. you don't expect a lot of things to happen. And, I think we've probably all, had an experience where, you weren't expecting something and maybe, one of your buddies, got killed, or, you had a situation to where you saw something you weren't expecting. One thing that really sticks with me, I think, that I was just thinking about this. I just drove across the country. That still affects me. They started in placing the insurgency started in placing covert and deep buried IEDs, and I mean we're talking about it's like 1,200 pounds of HME or homemade explosive, and they would literally leave 70-foot wide and 12-foot deep craters across the main highway in MSR Tampa, and one day a Navy EOD team rolled over this, and the culvert went up, and it literally lifted a Jersey, which is a huge armored vehicle, off the ground, flipped it on its top, and killed everybody but one guy inside. And these guys are Bo, one of the teammates. One of these guys is one of his really close friends, and I'm sure this sticks with him too. But just knowing that team and knowing the just the gravity of those things that happen, and the fact that you can't see that enemy is kind of crazy. And just knowing that if you roll over one of those, I mean, you're pretty much just done. And then we had times where there were firefights, and we weren't expecting to lose guys. I mean, we had one of our guys got this Distinguished Service Cross. His name was Christopher Corvo. There was a sniper Hyde that got compromised, and we lost a couple friends on that. I was really close with Tracy Willis, which is one of the guys. Corvo, I was up on that rooftop alone and defended Willis and Morley's bodies with terrorists coming up the east, or I guess it was the east and west stairwells, and until some Kiowas saw it and QRF got brought in, and but just stuff like that, man. Just remember those days. And we got called in early in that morning. We were on down cycle, and Tracy used to be in our company, and he's done an HHC in Scout Platoon, and Staff Sergeant Widener comes in one day and says, "Hey guys, I got some bad news," and we were never expecting Tracy, and said Tracy got killed this morning, and it hit us like a brick. Not something we expected to hear, and again, we were in our extension time at that point. We had just hit our extension time. We still had months to go after this, and it had already been a pretty rough year in Salhudin. So I don't know, I still think about those types of things all the time. I still think about those guys all the time. And I mean, yeah, it's just those things you weren't expecting, and things you weren't expecting to. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with the unexpected. I mean, that's pretty much what I got. I mean, I've got so many memories. We can stay on this podcast all day long.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a smooth transition, because what you have chosen to do, Alex, as far as rowing across the Atlantic Ocean, and I want to try to do this chronologically if we can, just for the listener's sake and understanding all this. I'm curious as to how you two cross paths for this whole thing, but is a better way to do this, ask how you came up with the idea, because the connective tissue here for those listening is you guys are doing this for veterans' mental health, and for not only the mental health, but the cognitive, behavioral, physical health of U.S. military and veteran personnel. And that's a big part of why you're doing this. And as we talk about the memories and the mental stuff that stays with you, I'm curious as to where you came up with the idea, or why you decided to take part in this venture across the Atlantic Ocean, which is called the Talisker Whiskey Atlantic Challenge. But give me some more background on that, Alex, please.
Okay, sure. So when I was with the British Army, it was the Staffordshire and Royal Green Jackets regiments, which are now 2 rifles. But Rory McKenzie was a medic in that unit, and we became really good friends immediately. And one day in early 2007, he got hit with EFP, or explosively formed projectile. And I mean, those devices will pretty much eat through any type of reactive armor that we have. It killed the guy sitting across from him and took his leg off. And he was in a coma for several weeks, and ended up having kind of a rough transition back. For the first several months coming off, say, oh, you're an above the knee amputee. Well, you might never walk again. Prosthetics are tough for above the knee amputees. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of pain. And so he gets into his prosthetic, and he's got some other buddies that are also, above the knee amputees and other servicemen. And they rode in this exact challenge in 2012 as amputees and other servicemen. So there are 3 amputees, one of which was a double amputee, and 2 able-bodied service members. And they completed the challenge, and they raised 1.4 million pound for various charities, various military charities in the UK. And I just, Rory and I still talk all the time, but I just thought that was so inspirational to people that are meaning to do adaptive sports, and people that are meaning to affect veterans and, in that sort of way. And, just show these guys that, you're not done, man. You can do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want in the world, and there's nothing holding you back at all. And I think it's positive to show guys that are going through, mental struggles or any other type of struggle, whatever type of struggle that there is, that, there is a finish line, and you can win here. Let's do this. And to show that through our actions, that we can give these guys strength and give them hope, and they can be on the team next year. They can do this. This is not a one-off project. This is a charitable organization. We're going to do this every year. So that's kind of the connective tissue as far as I'm concerned with the race, and coming up with, the American team here. And, Bryant and Bo and Chris, I was in 2505 with Bo. Okay.
I was going to ask you next how you recruited the rest of the team.
Right. So I was in 2505 with Bo. Bo was the guy that I just mentioned that was good friends with Chief Wade. He was an infantry guy. He stayed in 2505 and went back to Iraq in 08-09 after that deployment to Sadr, or Baghdad. They operated in Sadr a little bit. I can't remember entirely, but Bryant, Bo and I met Bryant at a Christmas party in Denver for oil and gas. We were all oil and gas professionals at some point. And immediately Bryant's like, well, yeah, man, let's do this. Bryant's a 20th Special Forces guy. He's retired major. And he was in, and, he's just been killing it ever since. Chris Kuntz, Bo and Chris knew each other from Powell, Wyoming, and Cody, Wyoming. And they were friends. And Chris is a former Rangerback guy, former Special Forces guy, so first Rangerback and first Special Forces group. And he pretty much the same thing. Oh yeah, let's do this. And so that's kind of how we recruited there. It just came together.
Jacob, do you ever wonder in your psychology degree when guys are like, yeah, let's row across the Atlantic Ocean, that there's something wrong with them? Because as I sit here and listen as a normal person, I go, yeah, that's probably not normal.
Yeah, it's a good, right off the cuff, it sounds like a crazy idea, right? And because it pretty much is a crazy idea. And Alex loves to say you can't just do a 5K anymore. You got to really do something to get people's attention. But
sure, yeah, it's a good pull.
After you spend 5 minutes talking to every one of the guys on this team, you realize that they would do anything to make this world better. And if, a 5K doesn't cut it, leave it to these 4 Army veterans to figure out a way to get on the ocean, even though they've never been in a boat before.
Right.
Leave it to these 4 Army dudes to figure out how to do something pretty extreme. So it does sound pretty crazy on the cuff, but these are 4 guys that truly can accomplish it.
Well, and I joke, but part of your psychological degree, concentration is in behavioral medicine. So, and you're at the University of Denver, part of the Graduate School of Professional Psychology, the Strum Specialty in Military Psychology. You're the faculty director of that. So kind of give me how you got into that, and then the connection to how you guys ended up linking up for Fight or Die.
Great question. So after I finished graduate school, I went and did a residency at the VA, or the Veterans Affairs, at the VA Center of Excellence in Primary Care Education. And of all places that is in Boise, Idaho. So I lived in Idaho for a year and a half to do that. And then I ended up doing a postdoctoral fellowship down at the Phoenix VA, the infamous Phoenix VA. But I will say it was a couple years after that scandal, but boy, was there still some lingering after effects around there at the time. But luckily nothing that my program or anything I was lucky to not be involved in. And so after graduate school, behavioral medicine really was my background and where I was heading. And so I did that residency and fellowship, both in behavioral medicine and was kind of on that trajectory. But I found out about this particular program at the University of Denver. The Sturm Family Foundation had decided to give a very large gift to the University of Denver to start a program in military and veterans mental health. And at the time, there weren't any other real programs across the country at universities that contained components like we have in this program now. And so the idea was that they would teach their graduate psychology students, who are all becoming clinical psychologists, they would teach them specialty information about military members and veterans and the things that they would need to know to go and treat those kinds of personnel. And so I saw this job was open, and that whoever got this job could go and build this program from scratch and really make an impact on our future clinicians in society. And so I thought, it's a long shot, because I'm just I'm doing my fellowship here. I'm early career. It's a long shot that I get a job like the faculty director. And lo and behold, I got the job. And on day one, I realized that I had an immense weight on my shoulders in terms of building a program that not only said that it was going to train future psychologists to be able to treat our service members and veterans adequately, but also that did so in a way that was competent and did so in a way that really changed and made people's lives better. Because anybody can treat a patient, but doing so in a way that's acceptable and that can help veterans and military members thrive, that's a challenge. And to be able to teach our future clinicians to do that, a serious, serious challenge. And so through that job, I got hooked in with Fight or Die. One of my colleagues, who happens to be Bryant's wife, teaches yoga and actually teaches a lot of veterans yoga. And I was doing a yoga study in my program at the time, and that's how I met her, was through a yoga study that I was conducting. And she told me about this group of guys doing this and said, would you know, any way that you could get them connected in the Denver community just to find some help? And I said, sure, I'm happy to get them connected and help them sort of drum up some support. And at the same time, I realized this is my chance to work on a really cool project, especially that fit my research interests. And so I said, would you mind if I met with the team? Because I think I might have something to offer here too. And I think we could find a really good partnership together. And that's how I found the team. And so I did my version of rolling out the red carpet, which was scheduling them to come and meet me on campus in the nicest room that we have on campus in the library. So that's about as good as you can do to roll out the red carpet at the University of Denver as a professor, is to invite someone to this really nice room in the library, which is what I did. And I don't know if they were expecting that a 30-something-year-old male who wears shorts and flip-flops was going to be who walks in asking to work with them. But that's what walked in the room. And so you can ask Alex and the rest of the guys how they felt about that. But lo and behold, I chatted with them, told them about my experience, what it is I was studying and doing, what my research is focused on, and what I thought I could do to help the team, what I thought they could do to help military and veterans in general, especially in terms of cognitive science. And the rest was history. So I don't know about you, Alex, but I don't know if you guys were expecting somebody who's sort of young and rough and kind of looked a bit like me, but really this has turned out to be a great partnership.
I agree, and I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting you to wear flip-flops and shorts to the dinner and speak, but you spoke very well. So I was happy about that too.
It was pants and flip-flops, but yeah, it was flip-flops.
Flip-flops are the central theme here that I'm taking away from this whole thing.
Oh, yeah, I'm from North Carolina, so rainbow sandals are the way to go, no matter the occasion.
Yeah. Let me ask you an anecdotal question here, Jacob, because just for everybody listening, and I think I could spitball some of the things, but I'll leave it to you as the professional. What is some of the core differences between treating a regular patient and treating a veteran patient as far as, the psychological aspects are concerned?
That's a really good question. You could ask 100 different psychologists this question. They're going to give you
100 different answers. Yeah,
absolutely. But I'm training my students to give the same answer every time, which is that military members and veterans have a unique skill set. And that doesn't just mean, oh, they were a gunner, oh, they were a radio operator. I don't mean that kind of skill set, not the MOS skill set. Their skill set is leadership. Their skill set is accountability. Their skill set is bravery in the face of danger. The skill set is to know how to directly communicate, to keep people alive, and to handle business appropriately. That's the skill set that all military members and veterans share, not their MOS. That's MOS, all of that stuff's great, but that skill set is what defines service members and veterans from the rest of society and throughout the world. And so that kind of culture is something I try and imbue in my students and help them to understand is they're going to have the same mental health problems as anybody. PTSD, TBI, major depression, suicidality, substance abuse, all these big clinical terms that we talk about and know and see in the media. I got it. You know about it. Everybody knows about it. A decent generalist psychologist can treat all those things. But the way that they show up in our military members and then the way that they change the lives of our military members and veterans is very, very different. And that's because that shared skill set that runs across military veterans and across military members, those kinds of personalities and those kinds of personal characteristics, problems like PTSD and depression and substance abuse show up differently in this population. And so understanding not only about how those sort of disorders show up or why they show up or how to treat them, that's, yes, very important. But understanding how they are caused and understanding why they develop in such a strong service-oriented population, that's something that we're really still learning about, and something I'm really trying to teach my students is that military culture has a huge component in the treatment of actual disorders.
Alex, when you heard that spiel from Jacob, what resonated with you and why was it such a critical match?
Well, because I've experienced it. I mean, I was a leader, and let the record show I wasn't a bad one. But I've gone through my own mental struggles, and when I got out of the Army, I'll tell you right now, I wanted to yell at people walking across the grass. I mean, the Army really, the standards, going back to standards-based stuff. I mean, that doesn't go away, and so we really do kind of have that. I guess that rigidity to us, to where we are very clear and concise with our actions whenever we have guidance, but when we go off track, or we don't have commander's intent, and all of a sudden we're out here without a mission, sometimes guys can get lost. And I'm not saying that I really experienced being lost when I got out. I kind of fell into a really good job and I excelled. But I still deal with with different mental health issues, anxiety, panic, insomnia, those sorts of things, to where I don't calm down. There's always something to do. There's always something on your mind. There's always something you forgot. There's, it's always like there's someone, something that's going to get you. You've always got to be, on your toes, and that can, I guess, for me anyway, has been kind of my issues with stemming from service. But if
I can jump in real quick, what Alex is really highlighting right now is sort of the antithesis of the narrative that we hear in the public and the narrative that we hear in the media, which is that guys like Alex get out and immediately they're having problems. They're immediately homeless. They immediately have PTSD. They're immediately drunk all the time. They're immediately angry. They get out and in days they're in jail. That's what the media is portraying, is that guys and girls are getting out and everything goes wrong in a heartbeat. And for some people that's true. But listen to what Alex is saying here, and it's that he actually was able to get out, get a job pretty quickly, doing pretty well. And it wasn't until later that some issues popped up. And that is the narrative that we're not hearing about a lot in the media, is that not everybody gets out and is doing really terribly. Sometimes it takes a while before problems set in. In the case of so many of our Vietnam brothers, it took years, 20, 30 years before problems set in sometimes. And so that's something the media is not talking about, and general conversations at a bar aren't talking about. They're just talking about the guys who are getting out now and not feeling good. But Alex, is what he's showing us is that there's so many guys who get out, and it takes a while before problems set in.
No, it's a great point. And honestly, a lot of people aren't aware of that. And unfortunately, the media and everything else is designed to do what it does. We'll leave that conversation for another day. But
Sure.
At the end of the day, the bottom line is there are people struggling, and whatever the circumstances are, the veterans who are struggling need help and deserve our help, and certainly deserve our time for all that they've given us. Alex, so your first meeting with Jacob, goes well. I mean, how do you guys start to go forward in this partnership, and kind of what's the goal, or what is Alex bringing to the table for Fight or Die that really crystallizes this whole thing to come together?
Well, so essentially we talked about, okay, this is what we are, and then Jacob explained this is what we are, and then we figured out that, well, this is a pretty good fit regardless of any tinkering, and then just figured out how we can highlight each other's programs essentially, and then make it into one. And then how do we affect as many people as possible? And that's both of our goals, right? I mean, we want to affect as many people as possible through this, through the message that we're bringing to the table, and the project itself. I mean, we're going to put 4 new guys in a boat, or girls, mind you, or amputees. We draw no lines here. If you're a veteran, give us a shout. And we're going to put 4 new people in a boat every year, and they can then carry that torch forward. In turn, what that does is, I mean, it creates. So this isn't a one-time thing. You're going to do this. You're going to annually. You're going to get 4 people to do this race, or this run. Absolutely, we already have interest. We've already got our 20. We've already got our 2020 skipper. His name's John Wright. He's a Marine, and he's a physical beast. He'll get it. But he's already volunteered for it. We've got numerous volunteers that have already contacted us and shown interest in actually doing the race itself. So this is not going to be a one-off project, like I said earlier, and what that does for Jacob's program and veterans as a whole that need help is, we publicize this. We get this out there. A lot of people don't know about this already, and I think it'll catch fire. And we're going to change lives through this.
No, I don't doubt it. I mean, it's the fact that you've already started recruiting for future years is incredibly impressive, and that people want to sign up and do this. What's the training for this like?
So as far as on a rowing machine, since our boat just took paint last night. It will be painted as an A10 Warthog when it's all complete, said and done. But
what kind of boat is it? Is it just like a canoe? Like, what are we talking here?
I mean, this is a canoe. This is a spaceship built for the water. Let's
Okay.
put it that way. I mean, it's 28 feet in length, about 5 feet in width, 6 feet from the top of the keel to the berthing. We have, all kinds of bells and whistles in this thing. So GPS, Iridium phones, Iridium Go, I mean, you name it, we got as far as combo
Who
goes,
made the boat?
E-Birds, all that. Spindrift Rowing out of Port Townsend, Washington, and both of these young ladies have made this crossing before, so they're very familiar with the stresses on the boat, on the actual vessel itself, and kind of what we need, what we need to purchase, what the best items are for this particular crossing. So we've kind of lucked out, and it was big for us to have as many things as we could on the boat American made. So there's only 2 boats that are going to be from Spindrift in this race. Everything else is essentially built from Rannoch Adventure. So we wanted to bring America to the table here, right? So
sure,
we went with an American company, and I'll tell you, the boat looks great. It looks great. So we'll get you some pictures over of it.
No, I mean, listen, and for those wondering, it's 3,000 miles, 50 days, obviously the 4 of you, and 100% self-sustained. And it's a transatlantic race that goes from La Gomera, Canary Islands, to Antigua, West Indies. I mean, that's unreal.
That's all correct. Now we're packing for for the 50, 60 days. Obviously better to have and not need than need and not have. Jacob has a number for you. I can't remember exactly what the numbers were. There were fractional strokes involved, but given the amount of strokes and it's a fractional amount of days that's involved. Once you did the math on what our training is producing as far as on a rowing machine, what it would take.
Some back of the napkin math in perfect conditions put this crew at rowing in about 34 and a half days. And that's with no wind, flat water, no flying fish or whales, like perfect weather, about 34 and a half days and about 1.6 million strokes per rower. That's what the perfect conditions that's how that might shake out.
It's a hell of a napkin, for the record.
It was a 30-minute napkin, but it was
Your degree was in psychology, not math, for crying out loud.
Correct. And those numbers actually I'm getting double checked by an engineer and statistician now, but I think we might be pretty close.
Now I feel a little bit better. All right, but Jacob, so when they're doing this undertaking, what is the goal for you? I mean, obviously, again, there's a veteran's goal, and there is an overall arching, creating awareness type thing, raising money, whatever it may be. But from a purely psychological standpoint, what do you hope to get out of this?
Yeah, really good question. So my research lab is called the Isolated, Confined, and Extreme Environments Laboratory. And so within my program, what our research is really focused on understanding is how humans not only survive in extreme environments, but how they thrive in extreme environments. Because I don't need to tell you or anybody else listening that every research piece of military and veteran mental health right now is focused on how do we treat a problem after it's already happened. And I am not interested in that. I am interested in treating problems before they happen. I am interested in making stressful events positive. And so what I'm looking at in this crew, amongst quite a few things, I'm really wanting to understand, number one, how they do this successfully. And if they have positive growth after doing it, they're voluntarily placing themselves into a very stressful, isolated, confined, and extreme environment. And so most people, when you put them in environments like this, come out with mental health problems, or they come out with stress. Now, while that may actually occur here, we have some evidence that shows that occasionally some people who go into these environments not only come out perfectly fine with no negative effects, they actually come out with positive effects, and good things happen to them. Their life changes for the positive after being exposed to these environments. That's what I'm interested in, is how can we purposefully expose people to environments like this so that when they come out on the other end, good things have occurred and bad things have not occurred. I hope that's making sense.
No, it doesn't.
And so this has immense kind of generalizability, especially to our military who are sending into extreme environments all day, every day, into polar scientists when we ask people to go live and work in places like Antarctica or oil rigs. And certainly for our next upcoming manned mission to Mars, this has a lot of applicability to that as well, because we are voluntarily asking people to live and work in these really stressful environments that most people couldn't make it in. And some people come out with growth on the other side. And so I'm trying to figure out how that works. How did they grow? Why did they grow? And how can we train people on the front end, whether it be in the military, whether it be at NASA, or just a row across the ocean? How can we train them on the front end to have growth afterwards and not negative outcomes?
Yeah, just a row across the Atlantic Ocean. No big deal. By the way, what was the name of your that center again that you're running?
So we at the University of Denver, we have the STERM specialty in military psychology, and that's
what you just talked about. What your focus was on, the extreme.
Yeah, so we have that program where I'm teaching students, and within that I have a research lab, and it's called the ICE Lab, the Isolated, Confined, and Extreme Environments Laboratory.
Okay, I was like, that's a hell of a name. There's got to be an acronym in there somewhere. I mean, you're a military guy, for crying out loud.
Well, we've toyed with military isolated, confined, and extreme environments,
that would be
or
mice.
Just dropping the military. Right, so it would be mice. But the problem is, every time I've used mice, everybody says, "Oh, you have mice," and I have to always explain, no, we don't have mice, we have people. So, we're kind of just going with ice at this point.
There you go, that works. Alex, let me ask you, what's your biggest fear in this whole thing?
I haven't put too much thought into the fear yet. I think that'll present itself. I think a lot of us have. I mean, we're going to be scared. I'm not going to try to play like we're not going to be. It's a daunting task, but I think, to be honest with you, I think we're all looking forward to being in that environment and conquering that again. I've got full confidence. I don't really have a fear about this. I know I'm going to be scared of a 60-foot wave. I know if I see a shark, I'm not going to really like it too much. But as far as what I'm scared of, the worst thing that could possibly happen is us not complete this, and that's not going to happen. And so I really don't have a fear. Really don't have a fear about this yet until I see a wave that is 6 stories tall. Then I might be scared, but we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Jacob, do you
maybe we'll have flat water and no flying fish,
and just 1.6 million strokes. Jacob, do you have a way to monitor? Biophysically monitor what's going on with them?
Yeah, good question. I'm working on the biophysically monitoring thing. Being able to monitor physiological output like heart rate, pulse oxygenation, and things like that in real time is actually really tough, considering that they're going to be in the middle of the ocean. Now, while some technology like that exists, it mainly belongs to places like SOCOM, JSOC, NASA. Those organizations have that ability. We don't have that ability, at least not at this point. If you have any listeners that want to help us out with that, we'll gladly talk to you. But mostly the agencies have abilities like that. But how I'm going to monitor them in real time is they're going to have a tablet computer with them, and they're doing a lot of studies while on this boat for me. One of which is being able to test their memory and their cognition every single day to find out, is their brain still capable of doing what they need it to do? Are they too sleep deprived to keep going? Can they actually and adequately make decisions based on their sleep deprivation, that kind of thing? But my way of really monitoring them, aside from the kinds of data they're going to be putting into the tablet, is going to be calling me on a satellite phone every day and me asking them some questions, not only just how are you doing? Is everything going okay? Has anyone killed each other yet? I'm actually going to be giving them some psychological tests over the phone that will allow me to at least be able to kind of have less fears when I go to sleep every night, to be able to know that cognitively they're where they need to be and that they can actually continue going. So the kinds of testing I'll be doing with them over the phone is very similar to what doctors do with climbers on Everest when they're testing their cognition in their memory when they're up at very, very high altitude and oxygen deprived. It's very similar work to that.
Right. Alex, that leads to the question. I didn't even think of it. I don't know why, but eat, rest, sleep, bathroom cycle, like how does this whole thing work?
The bathroom cycle, we're still having a discussion about that. It's ongoing. We'll let you know. No, but we're going to be taking in roughly 6,000 calories a day. We've got wet meals, dry meals, basically.
I suppose you can't order in.
Well, by race rules, no. I'm sure somebody would love to airdrop.
That'd be great. That'd be great if Uber Eats just started paddling on out to the middle Atlantic Ocean. Meet you guys out there. Here you go. Here's a cheesesteak. How about it?
Borrow Jimmy Buffett's yacht. Just play along, But no, it's wet meals, dry meals. So we're gonna have a lot of bars and those sorts of things, protein packs, gels. We desalinate our own water. So we've got a fairly expensive desalinator, and then we have a hand pump desalinator as well.
What's that? Just to take the ocean water and purify it?
Correct.
Okay.
To turn it into desalinated water. Correct. Into fresh water. And we're going to need a lot of it. So it's not just for drinking. We're going to have to we're going to have to bathe in it. So basically getting the salt water off of us. Salt sores are a huge thing out there. So, I mean, being out there exposed to the elements for so long, you've got to get that salt off your body. Otherwise, you start to develop, lesions and whatnot. So we need to make sure that personal hygiene is going to be a big thing out there. I know you're just on the water or whatnot, and people don't think about that, but it's going to be a huge thing when you go to keep everybody healthy. Is personal hygiene.
One other thing I neglected to mention, you're doing this in December. Last time I checked, the Atlantic Ocean in December isn't balmy temperature-wise.
Well, so it's kind of the calmest time along this route. We're heading around from La Gomera around the northwest portion of Africa, and then into the Caribbean, kind of along the stream there, or in the stream actually. But if you think about it, in December, the sun is then at the lowest point in the southern hemisphere, or getting around there, right? So you don't have the turbulent warm and cold water hitting each other like they kind of are right about now. On that line. Does that make sense?
It does. That's why I didn't join the Navy, because I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about.
I was in the Navy, and I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know what he's talking about either.
So
I missed Earth science that day.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know anything about much of this either until I had to start asking a lot of questions.
Well, I guess... the other three guys are looking to you, right? Alex, as the skipper of this whole thing, to have all this information? Or is this like a shared kind of, mental thing where you all have to understand each other's jobs and everything else?
Well, so the way we've approached that is that we have all put in an enormous amount of work in this. We're all leaders as well. And we all have a skill set to get that crew across, all of us. So we're really relying on one another. I mean, this is more of a team than it is, Skip says this, I guess you got to go swap the poop deck type thing. This is more of a team, right? Now, when it comes down to final call, if somebody has, really severe dehydration or seasickness or something like that, where we're looking at a medical emergency where this guy is laying on his back and he's been taking bags for days and still can't function, and he's telling me he's okay. Well, no one wants to make that call, but that's my responsibility, and I hope I don't have to make that call. But those types of things, so I'll be in charge of working with the race coordinators as far as our positioning, and kind of coordinating where we're at with them, coordinating with people back home. But we all kind of share each other's jobs. I mean, it's I think it's going to bring us more success than anything. I mean, we all know everything about this race and what we're doing, and this upcoming training event in Mobile, Alabama is really going to help us out as far as how we operate out there as a team. So no, I don't see this as a superior inferior relationship at all. If anything, it's everything but that. I see us as a team.
Jacob, while I may not have been paying attention in other science, I paid attention in biology and chemistry, knowing that in order for you to gain anything from these guys, you have to have a baseline, right? You have to figure out what their starting point is to see where they go and how high or how low they go from there. So what is the baseline for this? Are you monitoring them now as well? Are you sitting with them in these meetings and talking through this, or are you just waiting till race day?
Yeah, so for about the past 6 months, I've been joining them on their weekly meetings. We do weekly meetings via teleconference or via Zoom technology. So we're just essentially all talking to each other via the computer. And that happens most Sunday nights at this point. And so that's how most business is getting conducted on the team. And the majority of the time, it's just me just watching and listening and observing and writing down notes. And so I've been watching just behavior and some, helping with observations and some stressors along the way. But we did get some baseline research already. One of the things we've done is we recently have submitted an article for publication on the values that these guys all share. and understanding why and where those values came from to do something so extreme like this. But also I brought them into the lab at the University of Denver. They all came in from different parts of the country where they live, and I had them each of them sit down with one of my students for about 7 hours. And one of my students, graduate students, would sit with them and gave them a battery of psychological tests that included things like IQ, personality, achievement, performance, and cognition. All of these kinds of tests that we test in psychology, had each of them go through a big battery of these. And so I've got data from that. I've got data from being in their meetings. And every time I talk to them, I'm gathering data. Now, what Alex just briefly mentioned was that in a few weeks, we're going to be heading down to Mobile, Alabama, which is where essentially spring training is going to occur, where we get to see the boat, get on the boat, and actually row it around for the first time in the Gulf of Mexico. And so a lot of my baseline testing of things like memory, cognition, and physiological measures like heart rate and pulse oxygenation, those kinds of things, I'll get those baseline tests down there, not only before they get on the boat the first time, but after they've done their first few rows in relatively non-stressful water, in relatively secure, safe conditions. That'll provide me with the rest of the baseline data that I need before the actual trip itself.
I mean, I'll let you answer first, Jacob, as the medical professional, but Alex, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Is there anything that would deem them unfit for this event?
Yeah, so certainly a lot of red flags could pop up that could deem them unfit. A lot of your listeners and you yourself understand that at least in the special operations community within the military, every special operations forces operator goes through something called assessment and selection. And that may look different in the Army than it does in the Navy or in the Air Force. But in assessment and selection, you're really looking at a lot of candidates as a psychologist. You're looking at a lot of candidates and trying to screen in who can do a good job here and who's not going to do a good job and who's going to be a safety risk. Now, as a psychologist, when I would approach a mission like this, I would like to do assessment and selection. I'd like to see a bunch of people volunteering so that I could then figure out who is fit and who is not fit to do a mission like this. And in special operations or in NASA, that's exactly what we do. But these guys came to me having already selected themselves. So I only get to do half of it, which is the assessment portion. And so since they've selected themselves, I'm working with what I've got, which is these 4 guys. But it does turn out that all 4 of them are very high functioning, very intelligent individuals who are really, really capable and don't have the red flags we might see in somebody that we would not want going on a mission like this. So as it turns out, we've got 4 relatively capable guys, but some red flags that could pop up that we'd be looking for are things like inability to control your anger or inability to put plans in place to have your family function while you're gone. These guys could be gone for months at a time, depending on how long this actually goes. Looking for things like substance abuse history or problems with cognition and understanding, because one of the biggest stressors they're going to face is sleep deprivation. So if I've got a guy who is not doing well with their cognition or understanding just in the laboratory while everything's calm and they're in the air conditioning, I know that after 10 days of barely any sleep in the heat, in the sun with potential salt sores, they're really not going to be doing well. And so I'm looking for people who are very physically and mentally fit, but also who have the capability to withstand these kinds of extreme conditions. I hope that's making sense.
No, it makes total sense. Alex, what's been the hardest part about preparing for this?
To be honest with you, this is going to sound crazy. It's been fundraising. It's been fundraising because nobody in the United States has ever heard about people rowing the Atlantic Ocean, from Spain to the Caribbean. So telling somebody you're going to be rowing the ocean and you're doing this as part of a project for a charitable organization to support, the STERM specialty in military psychology out of the University of Denver, they really don't have anything to go on unless we get out here on programs like this. But it's been a hard start as far as fundraising and getting everything in line with respect to equipment and travel and those sorts of things. I mean, we've kind of been waiting on a lot of funding. And that being said, we're still we still need a good $100,000 to make this entirely successful, to include shipping our stuff back from Antigua to the States and then shipping that from from the port to where we're going to lay the boat and store the equipment. Our hotel stays in Antigua, food, airlines to and from where we're going, those sorts of things, on the tail end, and then tying up some of the last expenses we have right now, and getting some of this stuff over here. So, fundraising, I think, and just I guess marketing and advertising, if you want to put it that way. But that's been kind of the toughest thing in preparing. If all of that was taken care of, which it will be for the next team, then all you have to do is concentrate on rowing and training, and your mind doesn't have to be in a million places. And so and Jacob will have a have more time to gather what he wants to do for the next team. So I'm sure he's already preparing for that. But just getting everything ready to go has been probably the most difficult part.
Well, that's
Alex is speaking to the fundraising aspect, and honestly, all you yourself know, Alex, know, the listeners of your podcast know how important the military is, and they know about how great it is to give to veterans causes and to work with military and veteran causes to help improve this community. But honestly, out there in the greater United States, people are saturated with the military veteran story. It is not sexy to give your money to military veteran causes anymore. That's 5 years ago, 7 years ago. It's just not sexy to do that anymore. Everybody's moved on. People have hit saturation because the wars are still ongoing in Iraq and Afghanistan and other countries too. And no one tunes into that on TV anymore. This is not 2004 and 2005 when Alex and I were really junior and just taking orders, and it was all over television anymore. Military veteran stuff is just kind of pushed into the background now, and so it's not sexy to give to this anymore. And members of your community, I'm sure, back so many veteran causes, but it's so hard to really engage the public in this stuff because, as cool as it sounds, this is not where they want to put their money anymore. And I think that's really unfortunate that as a society and as a country, we've really started to tune out our military.
No, it's an excellent point, but Alex, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell people how they can donate, how they can help out, where they can go, because part of what we do here is to get those veterans organizations out there. Our hope at the Hazard Ground is to create a tighter, more well-known, well-knit veterans community, and we certainly want to help out wherever we can. And veterans listening, the one thing I've always said is that there are so many veterans organizations out there because we do the one thing we only know how to do, and that's take care of each other, right? Because that's what we learned. That was ingrained in us from the first day of basic, or the first day you put on a uniform, was you take care of your buddy. And so, that's our hope here at the Hazard Ground. But tell everybody how they can donate and how they could be a part of this.
Right, and thank you. And I think that actually goes to Jacob's point earlier about one of the skills we learned. We all absolutely do that. So, I want to thank you for making that point again. That's 100% true. So you can find us at www.usvetrow.org. usvetrow, as it sounds, .org. I'm not going to make it painful and spell that phonetically. And then you can also find us on Instagram as Fight or Die. Of course, hashtag Fight or Die, or Facebook, just Fight or Die, and it's OAR for boats. So we like puns, but OAR, Fight or Die. And you can Google us, and we actually have hits on Google from previous interviews that we have done. Bo did one last year. There's some other TV clips and whatnot from Mobile, Alabama, and Evansville, Indiana, and Denver, number 9, and so you can find us on Google now, matter of fact. So it's kind of cool. But usvetrow.org would be the best to find a donate button.
And finally, Jacob, I don't know if there's a way that you need help or assistance in this, but is there anything else that you need to kind of put a ribbon on?
No, if you want to check out the work we're doing at the University of Denver, you can check us out on Twitter, and our Twitter handle is @militarypsych. And all the work that comes out of our program, it's not my personal Twitter, it's just a program-specific Twitter that I run. You can check out our work there, or check us out on the University of Denver website. But I just really have to give it to these guys and the effort that they're putting in. This is not a one-time race. This is not a, get some money, do a thing, get some pats on the back and move on with the rest of your life. These guys are not only doing something extreme, they're doing something sustainable. They're building an organization that's going to serve military members and veterans from all walks of life for years to come. And I think that's something that I'm proud of. That's something this team is proud of. And that's something our community of military members and veterans should be proud of, is that these guys are doing something great and they're building a community. They are building an organization that's going to continue to serve our brothers and sisters for years to come.
And then finally, Alex, is there a way that people can monitor you guys while you're out on the ocean going across? I mean, you do posting updates or anything like that along the way?
So we will be posting updates from time to time, but the best way to go about that would be to go to atlanticcampaigns.com, and they will have a tracker of every boat on there. So, we're boat number 0. So just find us on there, and you can watch us come across to atlanticcampaigns.com.
And you guys do you know your exact leave date yet? I know it's December of this year, 2018, but do you know the exact start date?
Yes, it'll be December 12th.
So you're going to miss Christmas.
Well, and New Year's.
Well, they're not going to miss Christmas or New Year's. They're going to have Christmas, just like we all did when we were deployed.
Yes.
They're going to have Christmas and New Year's out there on the water. So it'll be a bit of a party.
Do you have a plan for Christmas and New Year's to celebrate while you're on the water, or just stay alive?
I haven't thought about that, but that's something we should definitely tackle.
Yeah, I mean,
Doc, I haven't thought about it too much.
As you would understand, relieving some of that stress with celebration might be good for their mental state.
Absolutely. Yeah, you bring up a very good point. Yeah, that kind of stress relief in a taste of home a lot of times can be extremely protective for people in environments like this. That's a really great point.
Well, I am just I'm in awe of what you're about to undertake, Alex. I'm in awe of what the 4 of you are going to do. The cause obviously speaks for itself, but the challenge that you're doing is unlike anything that we've had anybody do on this podcast, and so certainly. Best of luck. Wish you continued health and success throughout your training. And I agree with you. I have no doubt that you guys won't finish this thing. What kind of condition you'll be in when it's all said and done is probably a different discussion. But I have no doubt that you guys and the 4 of you in that boat will be on the other side of the Atlantic, standing there tall and proud and representing all of us for doing so. And of course, Dr. Jacob Hyde, I mean, what you're doing in the big picture is immense to all of us. And as you said, this isn't just a one-time thing. This is about growing in several different ways and trying to get to a problem before it becomes a problem. And I think that in and of itself is something that's incredibly, incredibly valuable to all of us. So for that, gentlemen, I'll leave you guys with any final words. If you want to say anything one more time, please let us know. And I thank you guys so much for being here.
Well, thanks for having us on. And really, the only thing that I would have to say is to follow us, get involved with this. It's not just veterans, it's not just civilians. We all have to be involved in this, and we plan to be a big part of changing veterans' lives through mental health. But it takes conversation to have, and it takes attention. So that's really all I have. Just anybody out there that's on the fence, I guess, that wouldn't be listening to you. But if they are, we've all got to be involved, civilians and veterans alike. And so we got to keep having this conversation.
And I appreciate you having me on as well. I'd leave your listeners with this, that if you're a military member or a veteran and you're out there struggling, realize that no matter what's going on in your life, you can get around it, you can get over it, you can improvise, adapt, and overcome, and you can make your life whatever you want it to be. You can have a family, you can have a job, you can row across the ocean, you can have a good night's sleep and a good day tomorrow. You can choose to do that, and you can find a way around it. Fight or die.
Alex Evans, Dr. Jacob Hyde, thank you guys so much for being part of the Hazard Ground, and best of luck, Alex.
Thanks so much, sir.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.